So what we're looking at right here is wild chervil as it's blooming, and it's just now creating some seed heads on it. And this is pretty much the plant that we've been working with as far as what's being used, had chemical herbicides used on it to eradicate it. It's kind of an interesting plant, has a real kind of feathery type leaf on it. Birds love it, little bugs, little pollinating flies and bees love it. It's really interesting. I'm going to go down and show you another patch, and this is an older patch where it's actually gone to seed to show you what those seeds look like. Hang on, and I'll be right back. So here I am. We've got ourselves a nice piece of wild chervil that's gone to seed. I'm here with Norm, who's a member of the Jefferson County Ecological Roadsides also. As you can see, it's quite a seed head here. It's also a very interesting seed. It's kind of shiny because it has lots of oil in it. The wild birds just love the seed. It'll fall off the plant onto the ground, and the little birds will be foraging it all through the winter. It's a pretty interesting plant. And again, you know, the flower attracts a lot of wild bees. There's over 500 varieties of wild bees in the Pacific Northwest, so we have more than honeybees and bumblebees. Bumblebees and the bigger honeybees, they don't particularly like this plant for flowers because the flower is pretty small, but our little orchard bees, our mason bees, they love this plant. And a lot of people believe it's here because it has filled a niche. As we took all the native plants out of our environment, there was no place for the bees to go. These plants came, they got heavily pollinated because the bees just love them. So we're kind of looking at this plant. It's been told to us that it's a very dangerous invasive plant. We need to use chemicals and herbicides to get rid of it because it's so bad. We're looking at it in a different way. We do have some plots that we're suppressing the plant so we can learn how to remove it without the chemicals, but we're also looking. In May 2012, members of the Jefferson County Ecological Roadsides and local farmers met in rural Jefferson County, Washington, to prepare the beginning of what was to become 17 research plots. The plots were being designed to show how to suppress wild chervil and other unwanted plants by using non-chemical methods. On this day, plot number 1 was being prepared. A large area of wild chervil was mowed and then covered with craft paper. Wood mulch was then placed on top of the mowed area and the craft paper. The mulch and other supplies were donated, as was the use of a backhoe. The chervil that was being covered was fully mature and had a very deep root system. The plants had just begun to flower. It was surmised that covering the plants for a couple of months would eradicate the plant, including the root system. At the end of the day, the volunteer team enjoyed a nice glass of cider provided by a local cidery. So a couple of months ago, on May 25th, is when we started these projects to look at what would allow us to suppress invasive plants. And our first ordeal, or our first experiment, was we had quite a large patch of wild chervil here. So we thought about it and we said, well, let's start with what we have, what materials we had. And we found some craft paper that was donated to us, a big roll of it. And then we had some mulch. So we covered the whole area. We first of all mowed the area to cut down the wild chervil. We put down craft paper, and we also put mulch on top of that to hold it all down. And we had some interesting results. It's probably not the best results, but it did show that with just a little bit of suppression, you can change the growth patterns of wild chervil. Now, I'm going to show you this bed. It's got quite a bit of green growth in it, but it's been very slow moving, where everything else out here, all the other wild chervil, has now gone to seed and died back. This plant actually slowed its growth, did not go to seed, and is just green. And that not going to seed is an important part of suppressing this plant over a long period of time, because the seed on these plants is just a great huge amount that gets spread by birds, by wind, and every year the patches of wild chervil get more and more thick. There's just more of it around, and we're trying to figure out how to suppress that life cycle of the plant too. So let me just have you look at this plot, and I'll give you some information about it. Hopefully you can see it. So what you're looking at is the wild chervil has come up. The paper itself was way too thin. It had light coming through it to keep it from coming up altogether. And the paper and the mulch didn't work as well, but this plant is known to, once you cut it, you often have to cut it 2 or 3 times a season, and it can go to seed a couple of times. So it didn't do that. It's not creating seed heads or flower heads. It's there, and you got dandelions and grass growing too. And then you have some bare spots, which is a good sign. We're getting close to understanding how to suppress this plant. Our next plots I'm going to show you are actually plots that we've covered with cardboard, and they're right here. And we put sand over that to hold it. And we're thinking that on roadsides it would have to be sand that would hold down anything rather than mulch. And that what we would do is to either grow the plants in a greenhouse or do a seed mixture of wildflowers mixed with sand and suppress the plants. We first mow it, put the cardboard down, and plant right into it. In the fall is when you want to plant native plant seeds. And so in a couple of weeks, it's August 15th now, so just the beginning of fall is when we'll actually be, just before the rainy season, we'll actually plant the native plant seeds into these beds. We'll grid them off, have little squares so we can identify what plant was planted where, and look at this. Some of these beds, on this side again, with the cardboard, have had the roots of all the plants that were there dug out first. And some of them all we did was mow. So we've got different scenarios that we're testing out to see what happens to the roots, what happens to the plants, and what will grow here. And we will be planting in each one of these beds, so our final results will be next year if we can see any growth with the wildflowers, the wild plants that have come up. Now these particular plants, these seeds that we're planting, are all wildflowers. Later on we'll be growing out the shrubs like the Pacific nine-bark spirea, ocean spray, our beautiful rhododendrons. Of course, we'll have a huge project to get that going, because again, we do have a goal of not only stopping the use of sprays, but actually replanting these roadsides so they become these beautiful places that they used to be, and you'll be able to drive along and see all the native wildflowers. And our theory is that the wildflowers, once they were mowed down and taken out, create an opportunity for some of these invasive plant communities to take over. On this side, what you're looking at is these are the solarization projects, where the first one here without plastic is kind of a control, where we've dug all the roots out and we're just going to see in general what's going to come back here. The second one is black plastic, and this third one is clear plastic, and these ones we also remove the roots and we put the plastic down because we're thinking there's a good seed bank in there and we just want to see what's there. Our first two clear plastic and black plastic, we left the roots in. So we're actually going to see if the plastic will cook that or what will happen. And again, what I want to say about that, because I was kind of far away from the camera, is the first ones are where we did not dig the roots out. We've just covered the area with the clear plastic and the black plastic, and we want to see if we can actually cook the plants. If it works right, what you're going to see is the plants will be there. You'll be able to scrape the plant material off easily. The roots themselves would have started to die, and they'll be easily removed from the soil. And this soil out here has been really full of sod and different kinds of invasive plants for a while, so it's a really good test site for us to look at. Again, we've got 17 plots. We've got different things set up, and we will be planting into them our wildflower mixes. We have a couple of plots we're going to be doing that are just going to be gridded off, and we'll be preparing those plots and planting our lovely, very rare lupins that are up here, the Arctic and the big leaf, and some of the most beautiful lupins I've ever seen are on the Olympic Peninsula, so we will be doing that. Another project is our wild grasses and sedges, which there's a lot of areas along our roadsides that are moist, and these things would grow here, and they also bloom pretty early. So we will have some experimental beds with just the sedges and the wild grasses to see how they grow in our experimental patches. So that's all I have today. I'm hoping you'll follow us along, and we'll have some results for you in about a month or so as we begin to take this plastic off. We are going to again plant into the beds that have the cardboard, but we're thinking we're going to have some pretty good results to show you that you don't need to use toxic chemicals to suppress plants. Thank you.
Well, the hummingbirds, butterflies, the kids that walk the road, old ladies picking berries, son, the crickets, frogs, and toads don't know the grass is toxic or that angleworms is done. We used to pull and mow the weeds in the fresh air and bright sun. Don't go rolling in the chervil, don't go rolling in the hay. They're full of poison ladybugs, 'cause the noxious weeds, they say. Meanwhile, all this hasty spraying is taking the bees away. So don't go rolling in the chervil, don't go rolling in the hay. Organic farms is dying, the water's dying too. Old Mother Earth is crying, her friends are far and few. Now they swear they have to do it, so they made a special gun.